Everyone shut up. Listen. Captain Maria Santos held up her hand, silencing the panicked voices around her. Through 12 feet of concrete and twisted rebar, through the darkness and the dust, she could hear something. A rhythm, a pattern. Tap, 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 tap. Someone was still alive down there. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. If you believe that the oldest solutions are sometimes the best ones, type signal in the comments before we continue. The Hartwell building had stood on the corner of 5th and Madison for 87 years. 5 stories of brick and mortar that had survived the Depression, 2 world wars, and the urban decay that had hollowed out downtown in the 70s. It had not survived the gas leak. The explosion happened at 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, when the basement was occupied by a city inspection team conducting a routine structural survey. 4 inspectors, 2 city engineers, 1 graduate student writing her thesis on historical architecture, and Gus Kowalski, the 71-year-old janitor who had maintained the building for the past 19 years, who had been showing them where the old boiler room connected to the original foundation when the world turned to fire and falling concrete. The blast collapsed the first floor into the basement, creating a pocket of survivable space roughly the size of a 2-car garage. Above them, the remaining 4 stories settled into an unstable heap that rescue crews were terrified to disturb. 1 wrong move, 1 shifted beam, and the entire structure would pancake down onto whatever remained below. The inspection team had been trapped for 43 minutes when their radios died, not damaged by the blast. Simply useless. The combination of concrete, rebar, and the building's original lead-lined walls created a signal dead zone that no amount of desperate channel switching could penetrate. Cell phones were equally worthless. They might as well have been trapped on the moon. Try again. Marcus Webb, the senior inspector, grabbed the radio from his colleague and shouted into it with the volume of a man who believed that loudness could overcome physics. Mayday, Mayday, this is Inspection Team 7. We are trapped in the basement of the Hartwell building. Does anyone copy? Static. Not even the courtesy of a broken signal. Just the empty hiss of radio waves going nowhere. The graduate student, a young woman named Jennifer Chen, had started crying softly in the corner. One of the engineers was hyperventilating. Another was praying in Spanish, her rosary beads clicking in the darkness. The flashlights they'd brought were already dimming, their batteries never designed for extended emergency use. Gus sat against the wall, watching the panic spread with the patient expression of a man who had seen worse. Dust coated his gray janitor's uniform, turning him into something that looked carved from concrete. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, but he hadn't bothered to wipe it away. He was thinking, calculating, remembering. "The radio isn't going to work," he said finally. His voice was quiet, but something in its tone cut through the chaos. Everyone turned to look at him. "What?" Webb's face twisted with frustration. "Old man, unless you've got a satellite phone in that mop bucket, I don't need your input right now." "I said the radio won't work." Gus pushed himself to his feet, his knees protesting audibly. "These walls are too thick. Original construction. They built them to last back then. Signal can't penetrate. Then we're dead." The hyperventilating engineer's voice cracked. "We're going to die down here." Gus shook his head slowly. "No, we just need a different kind of signal." He moved through the debris with surprising purpose, stepping over fallen beams, ducking under collapsed ceiling panels. The others watched him, too exhausted and frightened to ask questions. He reached the far corner of the space, where the old boiler system had once connected to the building's plumbing. Most of it was destroyed, pipes twisted and sheared by the explosion. But one section remained intact. A thick water main that ran vertically through the wall, connecting to the city's municipal system somewhere above them. Gus ran his hand along the pipe, feeling its surface, testing its resonance. He rapped on it with his knuckle. The sound was clear, metallic, alive. It carried through the pipe with the purity of a bell. "Does anyone have a wrench?" he asked. "Or anything metal, heavy enough to make noise?" The second engineer, a woman named Patricia Vance, dug through her inspection kit and produced a pipe wrench. "Will this work?" Gus took it from her hands, weighing it, testing its balance. "This will work fine." He positioned himself in front of the water main and began to tap. Not randomly, not desperately. A specific pattern, repeated with mechanical precision. 3 short taps, 3 long taps, 3 short taps, pause, then a different sequence. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, 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 tap. Over and over, the same patterns cycling through, the wrench striking the pipe with a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Webb watched with growing impatience. "What the hell are you doing? You think banging on a pipe is going to save us?" Gus didn't stop tapping. "Sound travels through metal better than through air. This pipe connects to the city water system. It runs for miles. Anyone with their ear to another pipe or standing near a connection point will hear this." "Hear what? Random banging?" "Morse code." Gus's rhythm never faltered. "I'm sending our location, building name, basement level, number of survivors. Request for rescue." The tapping continued, precise and patient, while the others exchanged glances that mixed skepticism with desperate hope. "You know Morse code?" Jennifer asked, her tears forgotten in the face of this strange development. "I was a radio man," Gus said simply. "A long time ago, the minutes stretched into an hour. The flashlights died completely, leaving them in darkness broken only by thin shafts of light filtering through cracks in the debris above. The air grew stale and warm. Jennifer's crying had stopped, replaced by a numb silence. The praying engineer had exhausted her rosary and now sat motionless, waiting for whatever came next. And through it all, Gus kept tapping. His arm must have been screaming with fatigue. His rhythm never wavered. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Location codes, status updates. The same message sent over and over, trusting that somewhere above them, someone was listening. "This is pointless." Webb's voice had lost its earlier aggression, deflated into despair. "Nobody's going to hear a pipe. Nobody even knows Morse code anymore. We're wasting what little time we have left." Gus stopped tapping. In the sudden silence, his voice carried with unexpected weight. "In 1958, I was on a submarine that lost power at 400 feet. Complete electrical failure, no radio, no way to signal the surface. We were trapped for 16 hours. He resumed his rhythm, the wrench striking metal with renewed purpose. "The only reason any of us survived was because our communications officer kept tapping on the hull. Someone on a destroyer heard it through their sonar. They found us. They saved us. Sound travels through metal. It always has. It always will." 93 minutes after the explosion, they heard it. Voices. Distant at first, muffled by concrete, but growing clearer. Then the sound of machinery. Drills. Cutting tools. Someone was coming. Someone had heard. The rescue team broke through 2 hours and 17 minutes after Gus had started tapping. The first face through the opening belonged to Captain Maria Santos, her helmet light blinding in the darkness. Behind her, a team of firefighters began the delicate process of extracting survivors from the pocket of space that had saved their lives. Gus was the last one out. He had insisted, waving away the paramedics, making sure everyone else was clear before allowing himself to be helped through the narrow passage they'd cut through the debris. When he finally emerged into the afternoon sunlight, squinting against brightness his eyes had forgotten, he found a crowd waiting. First responders, news crews, family members of the trapped team, and one man standing apart from the others, his fire chief's insignia catching the light. Chief Robert Aguilar had been with the Portland Fire Department for 31 years. He'd run rescue operations that made national news. He'd pulled survivors from earthquakes, floods, and building collapses across 3 states. But when he saw Gus Kowalski emerge from the rubble, his professional composure cracked into something raw and personal. He walked toward the old janitor, ignoring the paramedics trying to guide Gus toward an ambulance. When he reached him, Aguilar did something that made every firefighter present stop and stare. He removed his helmet, placed it over his heart, and bowed his head. "Chief Petty Officer Kowalski," Aguilar said, his voice thick with emotion. "USS Nautilus. It's an honor, sir." The reporters surged forward, sensing a story. The other survivors turned, confusion on their faces. Webb, who had dismissed Gus as a useless old man, stood frozen with his mouth hanging open. Aguilar turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying the authority of someone who understood the importance of what he was about to say. "The man you're looking at is Augustus Kowalski, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, retired. In 1954, he served aboard the USS Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. He was their primary Morse Code operator during some of the most classified missions of the Cold War." Aguilar paused, letting the information settle. Chief Kowalski and his crew set records for underwater endurance that stood for decades. They operated in conditions where radio communication was impossible, where the only way to reach the surface was through sound traveling through metal. The same technique he used today. He put a hand on Gus's shoulder. "We found you because one of my firefighters was checking pipe connections 3 blocks away, looking for gas line damage. He heard the tapping. He's former Navy. He recognized Morse Code when he heard it. He called it in, and we followed the sound straight to your location." Webb had pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of shame and wonder. "Sir, I'm sorry. In the basement, I said things. I didn't understand what you were doing." Gus looked at him with the same patient expression he'd worn throughout the entire ordeal. "You were scared. Scared people say things. What matters is that we're all standing here now." "But how did you stay so calm? How did you know it would work?" Gus shrugged, a small gesture that somehow contained decades of experience. "I didn't know. I hoped. But hope without action is just waiting to die. So I acted. That's all any of us can do." The story spread across news networks within hours. The old janitor who saved 7 lives by tapping Morse code on a water pipe. Interviews were requested, book deals offered, speaking engagements proposed. Gus declined them all. He returned to work at the Hartwell Building's sister property 2 weeks later, pushing his mop cart through hallways, nodding politely to people who now looked at him with something between awe and confusion. He didn't want fame. He'd spent his Navy career in the silent service, where recognition was the opposite of the goal. He wanted what he'd always wanted, to do his job, to be useful, to go home at night knowing he'd contributed something. The city installed a plaque in the lobby of the new building they constructed on the Hartwell site. It read, "In honor of Augustus Kowalski, who reminded us that the old ways still work when everything else fails." Below the words, they'd engraved the Morse code sequence he'd tapped for those desperate hours. SOS, Hartwell, basement, 7 alive. Send help. Marcus Webb visited Gus every week for the next 3 years, bringing coffee and asking questions. He learned Morse code himself, practicing until he could tap out basic messages without thinking. He installed a manual signaling kit in his inspection van, right next to the digital equipment that worked perfectly, except when it didn't. When Gus passed away at 78, Webb delivered the eulogy at his funeral. He told the story of the basement, of the tapping, of the moment he realized that the quiet old janitor he'd dismissed was the only reason any of them had survived. He told the congregation that Gus had taught him something about technology and progress, and the arrogance of assuming that newer always meant better. Sometimes, Webb said, the old solutions are the ones that save you. Sometimes the man with the wrench knows more than the man with the radio. Sometimes you just have to trust the sound traveling through metal, carrying hope to whoever might be listening.